If you're not using AI, you might get fired. I actually think the marketing, the CMO is the hardest one of like senior VP and up. I actually don't want the person that finished their job on Friday starting my company on Monday. Was my hit rate better or worse when I gave assignments or not? It's negligible. You're talking to the C whatever of this like you don't have more questions? Like that's a huge red flag. I always tell people hiring's like playing craps. Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck involved. It's still a crapshoot, but a good craps player will know there are certain things I can do to improve my luck.
Before we dive into our show today, do you struggle to stand out and get prospects or candidates to engage? If you watch regularly, you'll notice that I wear a lot of gear from vendors I love. This is not an accident. Sending unique gifts is one of the most powerful ways I've found to break through. A personalized bobblehead, a cactus, or my personal favorite, a great jacket. Gifting engages prospects, customers, and candidates and builds real relationships. That's why we've partnered with Zendesk, the #1 gifting platform, to send a Whispered branded jacket to every podcast guest. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow go-to-market talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder of Whispered. Today, I've got a guest. I think we're on the 51st episode, and I've been dying to get him on forever. My old boss, JD Peterson. JD is the current CMO at Perceptyx. I worked for him at Culture Amp when JD was Chief Growth Officer. We scaled that thing up, just one of the best runs of my career, and then also former Zendesk and a couple other great companies as well too. So JD really knows how to grow companies quickly, particularly in selling when you're selling to people, but also to selling to anybody. So JD, great to have you here.
Super excited to be here. Long overdue. Glad to be with you, Andy. And yeah, how I hire. I love the podcast. We could make this how I hired you if we want to, but but we'll keep it with your normal structure.
We will go through it because it's like you and I have never actually gone through that story. Well, there's pieces of it that are fun. I do remember when you were flying out, I was like, I want to just hang with the guy for an hour before I take the job. And so it was at a Irish bar near San Francisco airport where I met you. We spent some really good time and kind of effectively closed the deal then. So I'm always a big fan of like who you work for matters more than almost anything. And our 4 years together was amazing.
So huge. And that was even, I guess, before we were kind of full-time remote employee, type of people, but still that getting in front of people like face to face and having that ability to really sit down. And in that case, I don't know, have a drink or whatever we did. So important, especially in that closing step.
Yeah, it is. It's so crazy. I'm just trying to remember. We went through COVID together, I guess, in some senses, right? Which is
We did. I did.
we were Culture Amp was in San Francisco. We had great offices. We were kind of the 5 days a week. I didn't realize 5 days was wrong, and then we all just went home and kind of figured it out. And so it was an amazing run for sure.
Yeah, no, a lot of fun in that one. And yeah, always enjoy talking with you from those earliest days of working together, and through now and everything we're doing. So.
Well, you probably more than anybody I know has both at Culture Amp, but then also now at Perceptyx as well too, has sold to the people function, which is just amazing. So I think you probably think very deeply about how to engage people in the hiring process. So I'm really fun to talk this through.
Yeah, all my mentors said stay away from HR tech, but I didn't listen, and I love it. I actually find it to be a really interesting space and challenging in a good way.
I had a lot of fun with it too. I mean, I feel like we were able to hire unique personas
Yeah,
in sales teams as well. Like our
yeah,
our sales team at Culture Amp was not what you would consider your normal SaaS salespeople. They were, it's like we had, I won't go into specific names, but we had like terrific people that were really warm and engaging in different ways. I'm curious, like, how does when you look at Perceptyx and how you guys have built out the team there, do you run that same kind of vibe through, which is like they aren't all the traditional SaaS salespeople, or when you're selling to the human capital space, how do you think about like the personas that you need?
yeah. I think similar to Culture Amp, I think one of the things you get working in this particular domain is you get people, right? You get people who are really fired up about culture and people, and they seem they're very mission driven. Even I mean, most of ours at Perceptyx, I would say, still meet most of the criteria of kind of a classic, SaaS salesperson, killers out in the field and whatever. But they all ultimately are still pretty mission driven and pretty rooted in wanting to help businesses, wanting to help people at the end of the day inside of those businesses. So you do really, I tend to find them just really, really, even just the top most, ruthless, if you will, kind of salespeople we have, just great human beings and just great. You almost just have to be a real true people person to be able to sell to those HR leaders and kind of people on the other side. So yeah, I'd say we're probably not maybe quite on the extreme as we were in the early days of Culture Amp, and really kind of, we would bring people out of recruiting roles and all sorts of other interesting roles kind of into sales. We're probably a little more kind of traditional bag carrying salespeople to a sense, but still that same spirit, that same mission driven thing, I think, is behind it.
I like it. I mean, I think I always say before you pick the space you want to go into, go to the conference. I remember that conference we ran at the SF Ferry Pier
Yeah,
with the 1,500 people. It was one of the most amazing conferences. It was a 3-day conference, which I mean, 3 days is 1% of your year, and we had thousands of HR people come to that conference, which was just amazing. And if you go to that conference and you enjoy the cocktails or the conversations, you wanna be in that space, and
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
cool to see you running it back a second time.
No doubt, no doubt.
So when you join a company, like, how do you assess the team that you're picking up, the team on the ground, the leadership team? I'm curious, like, how do you wrap your arms around that?
Yeah, first thing I do is pay almost no attention to what I'm what I'm told by the incumbents or the sort of previous people. I think oftentimes it's easy to get sort of, I don't know, misled or led down a different path if you sort of weigh too much on like what the other leaders in the company are telling you about your team that you just inherited or that kind of thing. Like I want to get in and meet them all. So like, even when I joined Perceptyx, which was a little over a year ago, made it a really big point. I did a survey like right away with my team. So I think it was day 2, I put out a survey to the team to really try to dig into like what they're working on, what do they want to be working on that they're not, where do they see problems in the team, where do they see, what are our greatest advantages, all that kind of stuff. Which that alone honestly taught me so much about,
Yeah.
you could tell quickly who the people that are really engaged are or not by the way they kind of answer that stuff. I did one-on-ones with everybody on the team. Um, and I think it's like it's looking at their sort of current output, of course, and kind of judging the quality and the volume of the output. But really, I think you got to have those conversations and kind of getting into some of that survey data I have to start to figure out what's possible, though, because just because what they were doing yesterday and today isn't always an indicator of what they could be doing, what potential they have for the future. So I really want to lean into kind of both, like looking at obviously what they've done in their current work product, but really try to dig in and figure out like what's possible with this person. Where do they want to be? What skills do they have that are maybe being untapped and that sort of thing. And then you're definitely looking for collaboration, team players. I usually set a set of values. I'm a big believer in company values, but I sort of set it it's like a team values. This is kind of what we want in this case, marketing team. Uh, and I really want to see those things playing out in the early days, right? That people can live up to those things.
I like that a lot. I think obviously the culture surveys are so powerful. You and I have lived it for a while. The other thing I've heard people do, and you touched on this a little bit, is you're almost sitting down with each person and being like, "Hey, let's just are you still in the right job?
Right.
Are you still motivated? Are you?" And you're really kind of recutting their roles, and I think that's a
For
fun
sure.
opportunity because you're doing it early versus if you wait 4 months, then people can kinda lock into something as well
Yeah,
too.
bingo. Yep, exactly.
So before we dive into the kind of the hiring side, I'm curious, AI is changing every function, particularly marketing, right? Because you no longer need a designer and a copywriter and a campaign person. You can kind of collapse that. I'm curious, like, how do you look at the marketing function and the change that AI is bringing to it?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's changing so fast and every day. So one, it's like I got to spend a good chunk of my time actually just paying attention and
Yeah.
talking to people in my network and I'm probably going to more dinners and events than I used to for the last decade just to try to like learn and stay up on it. So I think that's
Yeah.
the first part. Something I talk about with my team constantly too, that I think maybe answers part of your question is there's really two ways we should be looking at AI within our marketing team. One is what can we automate and just sort
Okay.
of hit the productivity thing, the efficiency thing, right? What can we automate? What are the manual, menial things we can get off our plate, right? So we can move on to better stuff. That's definitely like one thing to look at AI. And I think that's where most people start, right?
Yeah.
But the second thing I'm constantly challenging them is, but what also can we do that we never could have done previously? What was impossible 5 years ago that's no longer impossible, right? Like, where can we push ourselves to do something totally different, right? And so we want to always be looking at it from both of those angles. And I'm constantly telling my people too, like, don't be afraid of the, myths of like AI coming and taking your job. It's going to come take your job if you don't get involved and you don't do anything with it. But actually, what's extremely valuable in the marketplace now is people who are really good at AI, right? Like if you're able to do amazing things with the AI and yeah, and you know, automate out all the sort of menial stuff out of your job. That's what's valuable. And like that's who's going to be valuable. And that's what's going to make you valuable at Perceptyx, but also your next job, whenever that might come down the line. Like you've got to be leaning in, you got to be doing it. And it's funny, by the way, just even in a year or so at Perceptyx, just how much things have changed. Like when I got here,
Yeah.
it was almost like AI was the secret that everyone was using in the background, but afraid to talk about it, right? Oh, I might get fired if it turns out he found out I did this presentation in AI. It's actually the opposite, and what I'm trying to encourage them is, no, like, if you're not using AI, you might get fired. It's you actually wanna be leaning in and, like, bringing that forward and talking about it. I think we've had a big culture change around that for sure.
I love that, and I think it was that December, January timeframe when everybody if you read that one article by that gentleman that wrote about how if you don't figure this out, I think I read it and I kinda put it aside for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I was like, "Oh, wow, this guy was right," and, it really is changing things. What would be something that you could have never done that you've been able to do with AI, JD?
I mean, some of it is just it comes back to just like creative things we're doing with our website and at a speed that we wouldn't have been able to do
Agree.
otherwise, right? Like whether it's certain animations or personalization types of things that we're doing just weren't possible. Some of the things we're doing with personalization just weren't possible like previously, or were possible but very, very difficult and expensive is
Well,
probably the better
it's
way.
like on our Whisper website, like I wanted to give people a view into how it's hard to see behind the firewall on what we do until people are there. And so I was able to build little widgets myself, which like basic, and then I was able to mock up the information. And that would
Totally.
probably have taken me a graphics team for months.
Totally. We're
The ability to
scaling our ABM program in a similar way, right? We want customized experiences coming in for all our named accounts, things like that. The way we're able to scale that up and the speed at which and the level of personalization is all stuff that was probably possible maybe before. So maybe I'm going against my statement, but was just really, really hard and really expensive and complicated. Now it's pretty simple,
I
right?
couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's like maybe stuff that just you could technically do, but like budget wise, you would have never
Right,
done.
right.
Yeah.
Impossible in the sense of our team and under our budget couldn't have pulled it off before. Yeah, yeah.
Those are neat. Okay, so JD, you've hired CS leaders, sales leaders, RevOps leaders, and marketing leaders. What's the toughest role in the GTM world to hire for?
All the GTM ones are probably similarly difficult, and I think a lot of that especially in growth startups, because I think a lot of it ties to stage. Like, you just nailing stage is probably the hardest thing, and finding the person who can hit the stage you're at and mature to sort of the next stage that's coming next. That's where my mind just goes first in terms of that's the hardest thing. If you're gonna force me to give you an answer of one of them, I'm gonna actually kinda say myself. I actually
Yeah.
with the marketing, the CMO is the hardest one of like senior VP and up. I think marketing is extremely difficult, right? And a lot of that too is because marketing is a pretty broad discipline, but most of the people come up on one specific path. They're just demand gen lane, or they're just product marketing lane, or what. Like people come up their career. Maybe even I'm the Google Ads person, right? And I get really good and I keep moving up the chain. And next thing I want a broader VP of marketing job. It can be pretty tough, like to get people who can really kind of fit and check all the boxes you need.
I could not agree more. Maybe that changes 5, 7 years from now when you have these full stack marketers where they're
Right.
bringing in the design, they're bringing in the campaigns, but I mean, I still do think storytelling and brand and demand gen are 3 different skills, but I can still see them collapsing a little bit more than before.
Totally, totally. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Nick Mehta, when we had him on the podcast, I asked him the same question, and he said marketing as well too,
Did
right?
he?
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
it's,
Not
it
surprised.
I think it's also, like, the ability for CEOs to judge marketing is oftentimes really hard because I think they wanna judge it on pipeline and how much did it do, but great marketers are building brands, messaging, they're doing experiments that may results in anything, and so I think it's not only is it the marketers that are hard to hire, but it's also, like, it's hard for CEOs to manage marketers too, and
And
so
and
I yeah.
and honestly, especially in our specific industry that we sort of live in, VC-backed companies and, a lot and mostly engineering technical type founders and CEOs, it's really hard with marketing because a lot of those folks, everything's very binary and black and white, right? And there's a right answer and a wrong answer, but marketing by its nature isn't always a binary, yes, no kind of situation. There is a lot of fuzziness to brand building and a lot of, I don't know, quote unquote soft things or things that are hard to measure. So it is much tougher in that sense. And especially with some of the audiences that are driving the companies we work for, right?
God, I couldn't agree more. It's I mean, the great marketers don't put more money into Google. They find a new channel that nobody's done, or they communicate something very complex simply.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, you said something which is interesting a minute ago, which was nailing stage is hard. I'd be curious, is that basically saying if somebody hasn't operated in our stage, um, you would not like, how do you think about stage?
Yeah. I mean, you kinda hit on probably the toughest thing there is, like, do you hire someone who hasn't been at that stage? Like, and how can you figure that out?
Well,
I
you
I
hired me from Box at 500,000,000 and you hired me into a company at 6, 7,000,000 in revenue. So yeah.
Right, so it can happen, like, absolutely, and I think there's great examples of that. So that's probably the first thing is you can't just completely pigeonhole somebody based on their experience they have been, but you have to and I'll look at, like, that particular case, why did we take the chance and bring you,
Yeah.
big company guy, I would say big company with a bit of a laugh, it wasn't like Box was
Yeah.
like, IBM or something, but you came from a bigger situation, why did we take that chance, right? I think you were able to demonstrate through the interview process, though, that you had the right sort of mindset, attitude, and skill set that worked for what we needed, which is a lot of agility, right? A lot of ability to deal with change, right? A lot of ability, we needed we were at that stage where it's like, kind of coming out of the garage or whatever, so to speak, but suddenly needing like structure and process and things like that. And you're an extremely process and kind of structure oriented person. So I think those things, a lot of what you brought actually fit what we were in the schedule, but we had to test for that and we had to like really push through that in the interview. The hard thing is like just some people just aren't made right for certain stages. I think, I don't know, people just assume sometimes that like, if you're good at marketing or you're good at sales, you can just drop in and run marketing or run sales at any company or any size, but it rarely actually works that way. Like leading and running a big team of people is a lot different than being the early initial hire, or having a very small team where you got to roll up the sleeves and go get involved deal by deal, and things like that. They're very different jobs. And so I think the key thing here is just to know where you're at in the stage and kind of where you're going next and really just trying to test and find fit for that is probably the most
I there's so many thoughts that come out of what you just said. So first, I remember my first day or two where I got handed the whiteboard marker to write the pipeline on the board because we didn't have a dashboard for it, and
Yeah.
I think it was like a month and a half where I finally got it into a dashboard, and then we were good.
That sounds
Uh,
about right.
yeah, I remember Shopkins being like, "Congrats, you now run RevOps, so you get the marker," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Great." So
Yeah. Pass the pen, pass the pen. Yeah.
that was great. To your point on stage, I think you're right. I mean, I remember like you look at somebody that's like LinkedIn, maybe selling to HR, but they have the enablement team. They have, they're not really outbounding as much as is dealing with inbound, and it's more closing. And so I've seen big companies sometimes struggle at theirs. But what are what are the questions you're asking to kind of figure out stage fit and check that box in your mind?
I think again, depending on like what stage fit you're at, which stage you're in, you're gonna obviously require like different things out of out of that person. And so
Yeah.
I think making sure that I think it's first getting clear about what you need, right? Really mapping and designing the job role itself to what you're gonna need at that stage, and then testing for those specific items. Like, can this person roll up the sleeves? Have they had a proven ability to do that? How deep can they go on a particular domain? Later stage, I might not need somebody who understands the inner workings of the tools we're using or whatever. But in an early stage, I do. Even understanding that, like what tools people are used to using, is like a big signal, right? If because we may not have the budget, right, at a smaller company, or hey, we may be, or the flip of that. So I think like those are big things. The kind of roles and the kind of supporting resources they're used to having, the
Love that.
budgets, like, I wanna get into all these things, and again, it's not only, like, have they done it or not, but it's then trying to explore, well, what would you do? What would you do if you only had half the budget that you had at Box, right? Like, what would you do then? What would you cut out? What would you do differently? It's, like, really trying to dig into that kinda level of stuff.
I like that a lot. The so maybe shifting gears then, which is how do you find talent for your teams? How are you sourcing it? Is this recruiters? Is this your own outbound? How do you think about like what's your tactic for getting the best people?
Yeah, probably, and if I mostly think senior on this, although it probably overlaps no matter what the role, it probably goes in this order. It's probably like my network always first. Like I want to tap like, my specific network. Then I would sort of spread, or maybe 1B of that answer is my fellow execs and or my investors and their network, right? So
Yep.
tapping the VC firm or the PE firm or whoever might be that's involved in us, tapping those people, right, for talent, the fellow execs, say, hey, like working with them. So kind of that, my and the extended network, that's definitely like the first place. Um, Another one that I probably have used inconsistently in my career, and I probably should use better, but is just like making the short list of companies I admire or who are doing and they just hunting out those people, right, that are in the seats at those companies. Oftentimes when I've done that, I haven't necessarily been able to hire them, because if they're at a great company, like they're probably doing great work. It's probably hard to pluck them out, right? If I admire them, because they're probably doing great things at a great place where they should be. But it often has led to them opening doors to other people. So
Yeah.
they become now part of my network that can open doors, and A players attract A player, right? They probably, if they're somebody great, they probably know other great people. But you can also just learn two things from talking to them of like profile attributes that then might be something to help us seek out. So kind of just finding people who are, a great head of sales or great head of marketing somewhere else, and going and kind of talking to them. Whether you can pry them or not, you're going to learn a lot. And then recruiters, though I definitely use recruiters. I'd say at Perceptyx, the vast majority of roles we have now are either kind of that first direct network or coming through recruiter. And we have an amazing internal recruiting kind of head. But historically, I'll use outside recruiters as well as inside. When I go outside, I've had probably better success with smaller boutique firms personally,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially for exec type roles, and especially go to market role exec type roles, or senior roles. Um, I prefer like the boutique firms that really specialize in a specific area. I just personally had better success with those.
I love that. I always say I don't want the firm that's like we specialize in series A to D, we do any role and like you give us your VP of sales, then we'll do your AE. I want somebody that's like very, very focused on a specific thing and they know those people and they do them well.
Yep.
You mentioned your network first when I asked you about sourcing, and I think you're great. Like you stay in touch with lots of people, you know lots of people, you're very friendly. But what tactics do you use to kind of like to make that network side work for you when you source?
How do I make the network work for me when I do it?
Yeah, or how are you building your network? What is networking mean to JD, and how are you
Yeah.
building it, maintaining it, and keeping it
Also
warm?
something I've probably been pretty inconsistent about in my career. There's probably been like peaks of valleys of
Yeah,
network building, but look, definitely. I mentioned earlier in this call, I've been busier recently, going to like dinners and events and things like that. I think that's like a huge way. Getting involved in I'm not the kind of guy that goes and joins 12 different organizations or associations, but a couple really good ones can go a long way. I know you and I are both. It's not like joining an association, we're both investors too, but like we're in the GTM fund. An
yeah.
incredible networking opportunity to meet other great GTM leaders and things like that. So having a couple of those always been really helpful to me. Like you said, though, honestly, the biggest thing for my own network has been, you know, I mean, I try to just generally live my life, right? Trying to be very like open door policy to anyone and trying to always be, leave on good terms with everybody, no matter what, whether it's I'm exiting someone from a company or I'm exiting from a company, and then staying in touch with people like as best I can. And it's not because it's not just those people, but it's those people's networks then becomes accessible, right? The closer I get and stay with you, Andy, right? Like then your network starts to filter into my network and bleed over. So a lot of it is just that with me is just like staying in touch with people. LinkedIn too, like obviously, you can just do a lot like finding people and getting invites and things on LinkedIn. I'm still one of those people who's pretty selective about who I accept into my network. Like, I don't just take anyone who comes and requests to be connected. I don't know. Some people tell you that's the best practice. You just want big numbers, just take
Mhm.
everybody. I'm still pretty selective, but I find that actually helps then because then when people come knocking, most of the time I have a pretty good idea of like, who to go to and
Oh,
or
you
when
mean
they
if
come
somebody
knocking
pings you,
with
it's gonna
me.
say, "Do you know that
Yeah.
person?" There's actually a high odds that you do know that
It's
person
a
for
high odds I know the person.
yeah.
Exactly. Like, exactly.
I think unfortunately I don't take most people, I'm still picky, but I've gone over that where I feel like I do want to have had a chat or a dialogue with people before I do it, but I'm fairly liberal.
Yep.
I think you're right that the network and the communities are really powerful, for sure in a lot of ways. I think also observation I'd have about you is exactly what you said, which is you're warm, welcoming, and friendly. My gut says probably hundreds of people reach out to you of like when they're popping their head up next, and it's like you're very easy and approachable, which I think makes it easy for people to come to you, and it probably also makes it very easy when you need to go to
Yeah.
somebody as well too.
No, I think so. I think so, and I
I
appreciate it.
feel like every time I think of all the Culture Amp alumni that come to me for advice on career, I'm betting they all also come to you as well too, plus even
Fair
some.
number, fair number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
And I love that stuff though. Quite honestly, there's like few things that get me more like excited than having conversations with people like about their career or about, opportunities they're considering and they want to bounce companies off me or things like that. I love that stuff. Love it.
That's why you and I are friends and why I built Whispered is I enjoy the
Absolutely.
same. Like if I could spend the rest of my career just helping people with opening doors and the good people,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Um, how do you maybe shifting to like how you interview? We already talked a little bit about how
Yeah.
you interview for stage. What do you? The one question on everyone's mind right now is builders, right? Like Builder, AI, Fluent. How are you is that a critical thing for you when you're interviewing at this stage, and
Yeah.
how do you evaluate that side of the equation?
I don't know if I have all my questions completely dialed into where they need to be, but we are definitely trying to interview and test for some amount of AI fluency. And, I think first and foremost, it's making sure the person, like, they are leaning in some way and they have a desire to lean in and
Yep.
learn, right? Or not just hanging on to the old ways. That's probably the most important stuff. And then look at raw experience, like what have they done? What are they using? What have they built? How are they applying it to their job already? Things like that. So, yeah, I mean, no question, obvious, cliche, but yeah, like looking for some level of kind of AI passion and fluency, like certainly super, super important right now. I think the whole idea of a builder, like, I mean, again, it depends on role and stage of like how important the building thing is
Hmm.
versus, especially at a leadership level versus kind of, leading and driving something that's a little more existing or in place. But generally speaking, yeah, like I love the builder sort of mindset. And I think before that was kind of maybe a big common term and things like that. It's something I always ask about in interviews and like always want to press into of like, you know, yeah, what have you like built from scratch? In some cases, that might be a whole team or a whole function. Other that might just be a specific project or a specific, specific campaign or, I mean, depending on level and what you're interviewing for, it can be a lot of things. But I definitely want to explore that with people. I think no matter what your role is, and honestly, no matter what stage of the company, there's always a certain amount of building that needs to be done, especially in these kind of like tech jobs that we have. It's creation. I mean, another fancy way of saying creation, right? Like I want to make sure people that can create stuff and have that creative kind of muscle and can take something from an idea and turn it into something real. It's just it's just critical in all these roles.
I agree. I mean, there's this world under which I have always had lots of little business ideas, and if I was only a developer, I could build them. Now I can,
Yeah.
and I feel like it really is creating a whole new world of builders, which is really fun.
Yeah, totally.
To your point on enjoying dinners and events, I built this thing I'll send you afterwards, whisperedevents.com. I've
Nice.
released it 2 weeks ago, but it's, you see a great event, drop it in. Yeah,
Love that.
it'll send you the ones that match your persona, and I was able to build that in, not too long,
Oh,
and
that's
it's really
awesome.
fun. Um, we were talking before we hit record on projects, assessment, take home work, and I asked you, like, "Where do you have strong opinions?" And you said, "Yes." So I'd be curious. I don't think you gave me one when I interviewed with you, so I'm fascinated to hear your take on projects and assessments.
We gave you a variation, which I'll come to in a minute, which I love actually. But look, I don't know. I don't have a crazy controversial take here, but what I'll say about like homework and assignments and that kind of thing. One is I do think they are a bit overrated.
Yeah.
I think there's become this big swing and this big hype of where everyone, no matter what the job role is trying to give a project, trying to give an assignment. And I can just honestly say of 25 plus years of interviewing people, was my hit rate better or worse when I gave assignments or not? It's negligible. It didn't really ultimately hasn't made a massive difference. So that's a little bit where I'm coming from on that. So that's like one piece is I'm just not sure
By
at
the
the
way, 100% agree with you on
yeah, I'm
this.
just
I
not
think
sure
it's
at
like
the end of the day it
yeah.
moves the needle that much in making the right decision. Second is I just think most companies out there, and I've gone through this even as a candidate, they just butcher like the
Yeah.
assignment itself. So maybe look, conceptually, I could sit here and say, yeah, giving someone something to test how they actually work and operate. Sure, who wouldn't think that's a good idea, whatever. The hard part is actually designing it where it can actually truly represent like the kind of work they will do, but it's also time boxed, right? So that we're not taxed, this is where it just gets out of control. Like I had a company tell me like, don't spend more than 2 hours on this thing. But then the project, there was like no way I could have spent less than 2 days on it and felt decent about what I was going to present. Right. Like these things just get totally out of whack. And I absolutely detest too, the like when they give you something real from their business to do. I do actually kind of agree with the whole ethical thing of like, well, if you're having me do work for you, pay me for it. Right. That kind of stuff. But also I just find it's like, I don't know, it's I just I've seen actually enough examples where, like, you're just kinda cheating and giving free ideas to people and that kind of thing. I also just think, like, I think so often the way these things are designed, it just, like, overstresses candidates out, and when you have it in your process, when you have a homework or a project in your process, it becomes kind of the ultimate be all end all, yes, no trigger, right? Someone could have nailed every aspect of the interview, get a little tweaked or do something a little wrong on the project because again, the instructions are short, like you don't have time, whatever. And then it just throws their candidacy out the window because somebody doesn't like the project, right? And I just think things are much more nuanced than that. And so, yeah, I struggle with doing it. Now, what do I like to do that is a little bit of this? And you actually did do this, Andy, when we hired you, because I remember it was a really big part of it. Is give me your plan. Like, give me your 30, 60, 90. Tell me, what are you going to do when you actually get here and walk me through it? And I think, especially if you tell the person up front, we're going to do that at the end, it actually forces diligence throughout the interview process.
Oh,
Like
you're right. Smart people are like asking questions that will inform that
bingo.
stuff.
The
Yeah.
good people then use that the whole time, the whole interview process, they're building their plan, right? They're asking the right questions of what's important. What are your needs? They're talking to other stakeholders, right? They're trying to figure it out. And I think, and I actually do clearly remember, like you delivered us a really great slide deck on like, here's based on what I've heard and based on what I've seen in the market and seeing about culture up in my own, research. Here's what I think I need to go do.
I'm gonna go dig it
I
up
need
in
to get
Google
off the
Slides.
whiteboard
Yeah.
for a dashboard. That was probably on slide 1, right? But, but yeah, like, I think that kind of stuff is important. Like, tell me what you're actually gonna do based on what you've learned, right?
I think the key insight here is so first 110% agree with you. I think people butcher these things every day. They sit there on ChatGPT. It's like dueling ChatGPTs. And
Yeah,
then they give you something that they haven't fully thought through that it's oh like 2 pages. Great. Take it, paste it, send it to them. It's a piece of
totally,
junk.
totally.
And then your point on like time expectations, exactly right. Like I advise people use these. I think there's another risk here that you didn't touch on, which is important, which is I advise candidates, and I think most people do now, is you're not assessing whether it's 2 hours, but to your point, it's gonna take to do it right and to be doing it proud, you're gonna take 20 hours
Yeah,
on these things. And
yeah,
so you should make a decision whether you wanna go further with that company. So I think companies may
totally.
lose some great people if they're like, "Fuck this shit." And so
Yeah,
I everything you said, I agree with. I think what I really liked most about yours, and I hope people take away from this, is you tell them the take home up front
yeah,
and then it actually forces them to do the right thing of the investigation. Like that is they're gonna be using that information at every single point of like, don't make it a surprise and don't make it something at the end that we just kind of threw in here because we needed to do it. I mean, I've had companies where I've been like, this is the person. And then the CEO will be like, and you need to do an exercise. I'm like, oh, great. So I'll bolt one on at the end. And so it's ridiculous. But I think your point of like, I'm going to tell you, hey, if we get to the end and we're having a great time, I will be asking you what's your 30, 60, 90. So start thinking about it now. And it'll just create a phenomenal process and the right expectations, and you'll get a good 30, 60, 90.
yeah, totally. And all this being said, by the way, like sales role plays, I'm all for that. If you're hiring
Yeah.
a salesperson, have them role play. If I'm hiring someone who's gonna do coding work, engineering, whatever, having them do a little code sample or whatever, absolutely, right? There are certain hard skills you might just have to test, right? It's more the whole like projecty stuff that I think it all kind of gets haywire, and especially for go-to-market roles.
I get, every couple days, a Whisper member sends me one. I love seeing them. They suck. Most
This
of them are most of them suck. I think it's similar to the way they're requiring candidates, like, do or don't use AI. I think there should be a, "Hey, did you use AI to create this thing, and how long did you spend on it?" My favorite guest we had, she said similar around you also talked about time boxing. She said, "Hey, we created this interview question, which is when you're ready, push go. We will give you the question and we will give you 2 minutes to think about it, and then we will immediately record your answer." I was like, "I love that."
That's cool.
Because here's the funny thing on the time boxing. You give me something, if I really know my stuff, I might be able to do it in 3 hours or 7
Sure,
hours.
sure.
And if I don't know my stuff, it may take me 40 hours. Either way, the work product may be fairly similar,
Right,
and you
right.
may not actually know how much do I really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, totally. You don't know that the company has no idea I stressed and spent all weekend on it where the other guy spent 30 minutes. It might be the same output to your point, but which one do I wanna hire? The one that, like, right? Like, that's important, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you might hire the person that did the better presentation versus the person that actually knows the stuff.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, that's a huge part of it too, the bias over that's like presentation bias. Now, granted, some roles presenting is important, right? But other times, you can overly bias just on the presentation versus the actual like work output, right? And people make that mistake all the time.
Totally. Yeah, some people aren't great public speakers when you put them in 4 on 1 is not a natural room scenario for sure.
Yeah, Andy, by the way, the last time I actually did one of these projects in an interview process, they had 9 people in the room evaluate like the project presentation. And that too, and people that I hadn't interviewed with or anything, I found that crazy too. It's like, wait a minute, suddenly I'm like in front of this 9-person panel. Is it one vote and I'm out? Like it just was very confusing to me.
Yeah, yeah. That's another pet peeve I have is panel bloat, right?
Yeah,
It's a
can't believe.
panel creep where
Yes.
great, we had 3 people, we had 5. Now the CEO wants to interview you, now the CFO, and then we're going to put another person. Like, "Ugh, come on."
Yeah. Same, same.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, JD, maybe wrapping it up, how do you make the people you've hired successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. Tied to that, I am a big believer in we'll call it the 90-day rule. Sometimes the 90 moves, but I am definitely a get them in, do the best you can at hiring. By the way, I always tell people hiring's like playing craps. Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of luck involved. It's still a crapshoot, but a good craps player will know there are certain things I can do to improve my luck versus just walking up and doing something, right? So do what you can, but interviewing still at the end of the day is not a exact science, right? You're going to make mistakes, but figure out those mistakes really fast.
Yes.
The longer you hold on to a bad hire, it just exponentially makes the problems worse. So I tell my people who are hiring, and I try to live by the like, in 90 days, we have to know if we're making a big investment of this person for the long term or not, right? And most of the time, I think I think people know they just have a hard time parting with it, for human reasons or anything else, or they don't want to look bad that they hired someone and now they have to get rid of them. But honestly, like the best thing you can do is move on quickly if you know it's not the right person or right fit. To get to your answer, so how do you help them be successful though? How do I make them be the right fit? One, I'll start right with this might even be controversial in my own company right now, but I actually am a big believer in a forced break between jobs. I actually don't want the person that finished their job on Friday starting my company on Monday. I actually want them to take a little bit of a break. I think that, you know, just to, help prevent burnout, to help give them some clarity, help them like take a breather in their life, get past the old thing a little bit and get to the new. So I actually really like people to take at least a week or two at least to kind of in between things, shake some of the cobwebs and move. So that's the first place. So coming
You're right, because there's this, like, you may have a cynicism or just a, like, a
totally.
and just take 2 weeks. It may end up with a better attitude on those first couple weeks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's a big part of it. And then it's always about balancing learning with quick wins for
Yeah.
me in the first kind of 90 days or those first early days of a hire. So I definitely want to make sure that I do provide the time and the space for them to really get in and learn. I think sometimes companies rush too much into giving way too many action items like right out of the gate. And like the person never has time to even learn where the bathroom is to harken back to our before we were remote. Like before, so like I think giving people that space to really lean in and learn just will ultimately, have multiplicative effect on what they're able to do if they've been able to like really ground it. But you also do have to find some quick wins. Like there's nothing that goes along further in getting someone successful in a company than to be able to put some pelts on the wall, right? To be able to early get a quick win that everybody sees and observes. So I try to find some things that I know they'll actually have a good chance at success with, and we could knock off quickly in their tenure so they can get those wins. They can get those visible wins where people see, oh wow, this person's contributing, they did something good. So it's making sure they get a quick win, but also making sure in their initial kind of early schedule, there's plenty of time for learning, which is meeting people, you know, reading obviously all and looking at all the materials and things like that. And, really just getting in and making sure they have time to, you know, kind of get acclimated to what we're all about and what our customers are about and all that sort of thing. So those are probably, the first thing, couple of minds. And then look, I'm heavy on the one-on-ones in the early days. I'm always
Yeah.
a weekly one-on-one type of person and fan for the most part. In those early days, I'll often schedule more or longer sessions,
Yep.
use them if we need them, what have you. Um, and and by the way, what I want to see from them is that they come asking a lot of questions. Like
Bingo.
it frustrates me and I get nervous about someone when I schedule those early one-on-ones and they kind of show up and they're like, well, I don't know, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, no, like I want the person that comes with 100 questions, like, because it shows they're engaged, right? They're running around, they're doing things, they're trying to figure it out. Like I want them coming and I want to give them the space where they know we have a lot of time where they can come ask me that stuff. So
I, I, I couldn't agree more. I always say if I've had 3 one-on-ones, I know if I've made a good hire or not.
Yeah.
Because if they're asking me good questions and they're checking in and they're telling me like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or "Here's an insight." The worst ones are if you don't hear much from them, for sure.
Yeah. By the way, same on the interview process. I'm personally, I'm more about what they ask me than what I ask them,
Me too.
quite honestly. Like, and it drives me crazy how many candidates I've even interviewed in the past year, honestly, but really the whole career, who like don't have that many questions ready, or like they ask two, and I'm like, "What's next?" And they're like, "I think that's all I got." And I'm like, What? Like you're talking to the C whatever of this like you don't have more questions? Like that's a huge red flag for
I
me.
never run out of questions. It's something I teach people. It's like, just don't stop, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly. That's what I would
the
tell so let's give advice right now. Every candidate out there in the world, like, have more questions than you're possibly gonna be able to get answered. Like, never run out of questions. That's a terrible sign for me when they run out of questions.
I agree more. It's because if you're interested in the business, you're gonna just have nonstop. And it's not like you have to have them all on a piece of paper. It's just like intellectually follow the next one down the hole.
Yeah, yeah, yep, totally.
Well, JD, this has been awesome. I've been excited to do this for about a year. I love that we did it. I would love to. We'll send you, courtesy of our new sponsor, Sendoso, a whispered hiring
Ooh,
vest,
there you go.
which you'll love. It's no longer called How I Hire because that's when I started to try to get you on. We got sued on a cease and desist, and so we had to rebrand to Whispered Hiring.
Oh, there you go.
So I'll
Sorry,
send you
because
that.
hopefully they won't sue based on me saying it earlier.
That's perfect, man. Well, thank you. This was an amazing time, and I love our 4 years were just awesome together, and the friendship we built afterwards is awesome.
Yeah, look, Andy, I'll say on the end, you know, you are someone I constantly think about and I reference as one of the best hires that I ever made, and you became a model in my head that I've then used for the next decade of what I'm looking for in people in that interview process and beyond. So always a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate you having me, and yeah, good luck with everything going on with Whispered, and yeah, hopefully a few people out there hear this and get a couple tips. So, yeah.